Hi, folks. Thanks for joining. We've got some folks still coming, and so we'll probably start in a few minutes, and we'll get going. Probably give it about 5 minutes or so, just to make sure we get the chance for everybody to come. Thanks. Hi, folks. Thanks again for your patience. We've got a couple of folks that are still waiting to come on, but we're going to get started now. We've got probably about 134 folks that are joining. So thanks again for being here for this. We'll get started now. So again, welcome to the Lakeside information session. Thanks again for being here. I'm Dr. Mark Szabo. I'm the Vice President Insights and Engagement at Anstease, and I'll be your moderator for the evening. Just so you know, Anstease has been retained by Slokker to help facilitate the community engagement and dialogue around Lakeside. And we want to make sure you know that Slokker Homes is the host of these two sessions, and they're being held outside of the official application process, so independent of the City of Chestermere. Purpose of both of these sessions tonight and on Thursday is to do a couple of things. One is we want to acknowledge that this is a difficult topic for the community as a whole, and for some folks more than others. We also want to acknowledge that the topic probably could have been broached better with the community, and the way folks have been getting information has probably been more disruptive than it could have been. We also want to create new lines of communication to give everyone a voice and get the thoughts, ideas, and concerns from the community directly before the formal process kicks off. We also want to provide some general ideas and some foundational principles for how the community might want to reimagine this space. And we also want to reflect back what we've heard from door knocking, from a brief survey that we did, and from comments that we found on lakesidefuture.com and on social media. So here's the program for this evening, and we want you to note that we're using principles recommended by the International Association of Public Participation as we move forward with this process. So first of all, we'll have a welcome from Peter Powell, the president of Slokker Homes, and then we'll look at the findings from a survey of folks who have some concerns about the space or who just responded to the ads that we put out about the survey. And then Peter Powell, who again is president of Slokker Homes, and Brian Horton, principal of O2 Planning, are going to give us some general ideas and foundational principles to consider as the community evaluates the best use for this land. And then we're going to take some questions. And as long as our technology cooperates with us, we'll have questions starting from members of the press, and then some folks from the Lakeside Greens Golf Course Preservation Society, who've done a great job of surfacing their issues and concerns. We'll take some questions from them, and then some other community residents who've also graciously agreed to participate. And thanks in advance to those folks. We're also going to take as many questions as practically possible from anyone participating online. And like we said, we've probably got, there's about 130 folks on there. So just send us a direct message in the MS Teams chat function, which you should be able to see on the website there. And then we'll get to as many of those questions as possible live. And for those that we aren't able to get to this evening, we'll keep those questions, and then we'll post the answers to that on lakesidefuture.com. We're also planning to record the proceedings and post them on the website as well, both tonight and tomorrow, for those in the community who haven't been able to join us. And it goes out without saying, but there's no tolerance for any personal attacks, bullying, or any other sort of inappropriate behavior. And thank you in advance for bearing with the online technology. Someday soon we're going to be able to get in a room together, but for now we're going to have to make the best of the technology that we have available to us. So at this point, Peter Powell, who's president of Slokker Homes, would like to say a few words. So we'll throw over to Peter.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for participating in basically what we call a pre-engagement or engagement session. We hope to have many more, where we can work through any and all ideas that come up throughout the process of envisioning a new Chestermere Village Center. Before I start, I want to take the opportunity to basically speak to all of you and basically apologize on behalf of Slokker Homes about the abrupt way Slokker Homes was introduced to the community. We would have had the preference to see that a little bit more smooth, in the sense that all of a sudden this came into the news, and quite widely so. Normally we try to be very open and frank to everyone involved, and to make sure that we give all the information available at the right time and upfront. Anyways, The presentation coming up will give you a little bit of feedback of what we have heard to date. We hope you appreciate that. And then we will follow with the presentation of Brian Horton, the planner of O2, working for us. So again, thank you for joining this session.
Great, thanks, Peter. Just want to make sure that great. So let's start off with a look at the survey that we did. So we heard some concerned voices from our survey, and so we wanted to make sure that we got an effort to hear from them in a sort of organized sort of fashion. And so the findings from this survey are what we'll talk about right now. So briefly, we'll talk about the survey itself, some of the demographics of the folks that responded. We asked, why did you move to Chestermere, and talked about public area usage and what does living here mean to you, and what's the importance of local business support, and then what are your priorities for the city. So about the survey, it was a quantitative survey, so stats and figures. It was in field from December 10th to February 9th. 374 folks completed the survey, and we got respondents from lakesidefuture.com opt-ins, so the folks that had expressed concern about the project early on and were quite vocal about that. So we gave them a chance to fill in the survey, and we also ran some ads in the Anchor and on Facebook to give as many people as possible a say in the survey. It's important to note, and this is going to come up for sure, wasn't a poll in the sense that it doesn't represent everyone in the city of Chestermere necessarily. It wasn't a random sample of everybody. It's mostly from concerned folks who had, like we said, signed up for updates on Lakeside Future, or who had responded to those ads. So it does, though, give us a good starting point for the discussion around what's important to the folks that responded and what living in Chestermere means to them. So as we frame the discussion around the space, regardless of what happens to it, this will be useful information for everybody. Quickly, the demographics of the folks that answered the questions. We wanted to make sure that only folks that had an informed opinion about Chestermere were allowed into the study. So 100% of the folks that were allowed into the study said that they had enough knowledge about Chestermere to have an informed opinion. 92% of the folks that responded were from Chestermere. 37% of the folks that answered had an annual income of over $150,000 a year. Interestingly, that number would be 2.5% of Canadians overall. 82% of the respondents have lived in Chestermere between 4 and 30 years. Gen X was the largest group of respondents at 31%, roughly even for millennials, boomers, and retirement. The gender was evenly split between males and females. Most of the folks were employed full-time, and 22% were retired. The majority of our respondents had some sort of post-secondary education from college or university. 88% of the respondents were married or live in common law. 79% of the respondents had kids. 48% had kids that were living at home with them, and 14% had no kids. Interesting, 57% of the respondents had pets. 41% had pets that need outdoor space, which is important. And 39% said they don't have pets at all. So that's a quick overview of the demographics of the folks that answered. Then we asked them some interesting questions around, what life events triggered you to move to Chestermere in the first place? And number one, by far, was having more space. And so the top answers here were they wanted to have more space, they had an improvement in financial position, or they came for work, or more life events like new children in the family, retirement, and marriage. So what's interesting about this to us is, from a planning perspective, really whatever happens with this space, it really needs to respect the importance of folks coming to Chestermere wanting more space, and to have that in their living environment. We also need to understand that for a lot of folks, Chestermere is a reward for their success, which is an important consideration as we plan out this space. It's also worth noting, just by way of interest, that the groups that most valued that more space were folks that were full-time employed, the Gen X generation, and folks that had children at home. Then we asked folks about the public area usage, and this ranks the public areas that we saw. So higher usage is at the top, lower usage is at the bottom, and the most frequently used spaces were the lake, John Peak, Canal Bike Path, Anniversary Park, and the Headworks Canal Pathway, in that order. Of less importance were these, the Centennial Park. Least noted was Trenton Park. So the implications here are that that area where Chestermere Boulevard bisects the lake is a really important juncture for recreational traffic, obviously. So access to the lake from Lakeside area is going to be a very important consideration, whatever happens there. And also bike and walking paths will likely be a priority moving forward. And we see that in other ways as well. Then we asked an open-ended question, just top of mind, what does living in Chestermere mean to you? And these were the responses. Number one was small town feel. By far, you can see how much of an impact does. 42% versus 26% being the next one. So the small town feel of Chestermere is absolutely critical to everyone. Lakeside golfing was number two. Family, friends, and neighbors is number three. Time spent on the lake, number four. It's a perfect distance from Calgary. Not too far, not too close, just perfect. It's safe and secluded, outdoor sports and recreation, and then green space. So these were the top answers. But again, if we remember nothing else from this survey, I think the small town feel is absolutely critical, and that really, really was important to folks. Planning implications for this. So again, maintaining that small town feel of Chestermere distinct from Calgary is going to be a very strong priority, at least for the folks that answered this survey. It's going to be important for us to help create the connection between family, friends, and neighbors. As we design a space, how we're going to make sure that that can be an important element of what happens. The Lakeside Golf Club is important to members for recreation, obviously, but also what came from this was it's a place to create community connections and really develop the next generation. And that came through loud and clear as well in terms of how people value the club. The green space and integration of the lake is going to be important. And obviously pet-friendly spaces were also going to be really important. It's also worth noting that the folks that said friends, family, and neighbors, that was mostly important to females and to those that have children at home. And pet owners, not surprisingly, were more likely to value green space and the walkability and pathways. Then we asked folks, what's the importance of local business? So first question was, how important is it for you to have all of the businesses and services you need right here in Chestermere? And this goes to the heart of the viability of the community. 63% said it's important or very important to have all those businesses that they need right here in Chestermere. Similarly, we asked them, how much do you agree with the fact that you'd like to patronize local businesses as much as possible? Fully 82% said, yep, they would like to patronize local businesses as much as they possibly can. So any planning implications around this, supporting local business is going to be really important to residents, and it will be a part of ensuring the long-term viability of the community from two perspectives. One is creating local business-friendly spaces to begin with, so enabling that to happen. And then second of all, enabling businesses, local businesses, to be part of any development process that happens. So as it unfolds, however it unfolds, local businesses need to win and be integrated tightly into that success of that. Then we asked folks a list of things to rank in terms of their priorities for Chestermere over the next few years. So we gave them a list and they ranked it. And this is what they said. They said, number one, keep the golf course, which makes sense given who was responding to the survey. Of course, they want to keep the golf course. And lower taxes is second. More public space, more interconnected paths, increased variety of services and retail, better protection of the environment, less vehicle traffic, and better access to the lake. So planning implications here, the benefits of the golf course, if it gets changed, would have to be diffused across other amenities for non-member residents. So example, more public green spaces, interconnected walking and biking paths, increased variety of retail, better protection of the environment, access to the lake. And also any new space would need to include opportunities to create a net positive impact on tax revenue. We then asked the same question, is there anything else? Open question, whatever's at the top of your mind, any other priorities that you have? And this is what folks said. They said, number one, keep the golf course, commercial and industrial growth, but other folks said to slow development down. The new recreation center and a public pool were top priorities. Again, just top of mind for folks, unaided questions from them. So planning implications, similar to the previous regarding any benefits and amenities from the course, the same sort of thing would apply to there. Facilitating opportunities for commercial growth should be a priority. The pace of development in Chestermere is a concern for some folks. It's not really in anybody's direct control, but is a big concern for folks. Amenities being planned should account for the interest in the new rec center and public pool. So not necessarily on this particular space, but understanding that those are a priority from the community and will eventually be coming on stream. How do we make sure that we're fitting in that context? And then just some interesting notes. Males tended to favor more commercial and industrial growth. Females tended to favor more green space and walkable pathways. Those with 100 to 150,000 in income were more likely to want development to be slowed. And those with kids at home were more likely to want that commercial and industrial growth and the public pool. So those were the main findings of the survey. And again, this is interesting intel. It helps us to have some starting points to frame the discussion. And independent of this, and as the information started rolling in, Peter and Brian started looking at some options for how we might want to start framing a vision for Lakeside. So I'm going to hand it over to Brian Horton from O2, the folks doing this planning. And he is going to chat through some visions and some ideas and some high-level concepts for this space. So just give me a moment here and I will throw this over to Brian.
Thanks, Mark.
You bet.
Yeah. As way of introduction, my name is Brian Horton. I'm a principal at O2 Planning and Design. We're a planning, urban design, and landscape architecture firm based in Calgary. And we have quite a bit of familiarity with Chestermere, having worked with administration on the preparation of the last MDP. And we work across the country. We do probably the majority of our work in Calgary in the region. We're working in Rocky View, and we see this as a very exciting opportunity to work with Slokker and the group here. Next slide, please, Mark. So as planners and urban designers, we do really feel that this is a fantastic opportunity for Chestermere to create a distinct center, and to be able to provide the residents a viable and vibrant town center, new parks and public spaces, and all the amenities that come with a true town center for a city the size of Chestermere. My presentation will go through some of the reasons why we think this would be good. Next slide, please. So my presentation is going to be focused on the principles that we're working towards. And as we move through the engagement with the community, these principles can be refined, but these are the first set of guiding principles that our planning is founded on. So one is the creation of a mixed-use town center, the opportunity to create a healthy community amenities for the residents of Chestermere, the delivery of more open space and recreation opportunities, and a focus on infrastructure and economy. Next slide, please, Mark. So if we look at Chestermere and the way it sits within the Calgary region, there's a real risk that with the expansion of Calgary, especially to the East Hills Shopping Center, the Belvedere area, that there's a real pull of the economy out of Chestermere in terms of the shops and services and housing to that area of Calgary. And we really think that the redevelopment of Lakeside could counter this pull, and its location within really the center of Chestermere has the opportunity to become a true urban center where the shops and services, jobs can be created, new open spaces can be provided, and really be an alternative to Calgary, where residents of Chestermere can stay, the young people can stay, they can find jobs, and it'll be a really attractive place to live. Especially, with the pandemic, we know that people are looking to live a different lifestyle and the ability to live in smaller centers as well, and that the commute to Calgary isn't as important. So this location is very strategically located in that sense. And next slide, please. So our idea is to focus any new development around a mixed-use center that is anchored by a high street or a main street. So this would be similar to places that I'm sure everybody's experienced in other smaller towns. We like European examples where there's an ability to walk to all the shops and services to take care of your daily needs. So think of the butcher, baker, hairdresser, etc. The opportunity for living spaces above, and where there might be a bit more intensity around the town center, and then as it is dispersed further away, it would turn into more of a residential community. And this is really like we have an image there of the current center, but also of where the way the development is typically happening even on the east side, with large parking lots and a focus on cars. We really want to focus on the human scale and the ability for socialization and more intimate spaces. Next slide, please. Slokker particularly is, and our firm have looked at ways to create healthy communities. So again, we have seen with the pandemic that there's a highlight of the importance of access to open space and nature, and you just see the amount of people out walking on pathways and trails and using the public spaces. We feel that this is an opportunity to even create more publicly accessible open space and foster alternative and modes of transportation other than the car. So walking, cycling, and also the potential of transit, which would connect to Calgary. Next slide, please. So within that healthy community spectrum, we believe that there should be a real focus on walkability and biking. And so this map shows the existing Chestermere bike network. And as you can see, there's really a gap in the middle where the golf course is. So by providing additional pathways through the golf course, we really see that this can fill the gap in Chestermere from north to south, especially with along the power lines, but also be able to have a development that would be focused on cycling. So it would be really a bike-oriented development. So people from all over Chestermere could come and bike to this town center, but also go through it. And as well, it would obviously connect to the lake and could also and to Calgary through the canal bike path. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, we really do want to focus on publicly accessible open space. And so this diagram shows a very early indication of what we think could be the provision of publicly accessible open space of the existing golf course. So we really do have the benefit of space here, and the existing ponds and water network. And we believe that we can provide at least 40% of the existing golf course as new publicly accessible open space, and that could be filled with amenities such as both formal parks, playgrounds, play spaces, but also informal pathways and bikeways, and just green spaces. And our firm being landscape architects, we always try and design as sustainably as possible using native plants and species. And we feel that this is a way to really create a fantastic green space for all residents of Chestermere. And that's really the focus, is that these green spaces would be accessible to all, all days of the year, rather than a golf course which just has limited accessibility to those who are either paying the green fee or members of the golf course. Next slide, please. So it'll be really important to us as we move through the planning process to talk with the community about what kind of spaces and what kind of programming they'd like to see in these space in the open space. We have some ideas, thinking that they could be like sports facilities, tennis courts, baseball fields, etc. Play structures for children, both natural and more formal, skating rinks for the winter, cross-country ski trails for the winter, as well as community pavilions for entertainment, performances, as well as a potential market structure for farmers markets and different events. We also think that the master planning process of this site could lead into some ideas of how the neighboring site, the rec center, could be redeveloped, and also a very important potential link to the lake, which is obviously a major amenity of Chestermere, but doesn't have the public access that it may should, or the connection into a community. So creating a center that could be connected into the lakefront would be fantastic for Chestermere. Next slide, please. Just a little bit on the infrastructure and economy. Our team has done a bit of preliminary work on some engineering analysis, and the findings are that there's a real opportunity to reuse as much of the existing infrastructure that already is in place in Chestermere as possible. And this is fantastic because of its location. It's right in the center of town, so it is well serviced. So the difference here being, instead of developing on the outer edges and having to put in all new infrastructure, we can use some of the existing infrastructure, and there's an opportunity there to lower the taxes on average for each household in Chestermere. As well, there would be some needed upgrades to the existing sewer system, which is at capacity, which would be a benefit to the overall town or city, and also revising the stormwater drainage system. The golf course is right in the middle. It actually is a key part, could play a key part in addressing some of the shortcomings in the current stormwater drainage system, and some of the longstanding issues to mitigate flooding as witnessed in 2013 and 2015. Next slide, please. So regarding the financial viability of the golf course, the Lakeside Greens has been operating at a financial loss since 2016. Golf courses in general are not doing as well, and we do not see that the financial situation of the golf course being improved, particularly because it would require a 32.5% increase in revenue over the next 5 years just to cover the capital costs, operating costs, and long-term debt servicing. So, you know, and in terms of the benefit to the city, the golf course currently pays around 166,000 of tax per year, where based on a very conservative estimate, a new development could generate upwards of 3.9 million per year. Thanks. To the next slide, please. We've heard that there's some concerns about property values, and based on some research of some of the literature regarding the effects of golf courses on property values, it's really indicative that the homes that front onto golf courses have the biggest benefit of in terms of their property values. But in general, it's actually access to open space that has a more direct impact on a greater number of homes in terms of raising their property values. So we believe by providing more open space that's publicly accessible, this could be a greater benefit overall to Chestermere, as well as walkability. I've mentioned, you know, the shift of consumer taste to the desire to live in very walkable communities. But when there's also studies that have been completed that demonstrate that walkability adds also value to home values, and this can be demonstrated just by, you know, on realtor websites now they show a walk score, and usually the higher the better. It results in the potential for higher value in homes. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, we believe that this site offers a great opportunity as planners, as landscape architects, as urban designers, to create something very special for the city of Chestermere. But it cannot be done without the input of the residents of Chestermere. And we're very early in our planning process. What we presented are just initial ideas. And as we work through the planning and the design of the community, we'll be engaging with the community, city administration, and other stakeholders regarding the elements that will go into the design. So right now, we're at a very early stage, initial concepts and principles, and as we move forward, these will be tailored to the discussions that we've had. So yeah, thanks. That completes my presentation.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks so much. So, folks, at this point, we want to take some questions, and we've had a little bit of tech challenges just in terms of getting some of the folks dialed in, but we've got lots of good questions here, and so we'll probably get either Brian and or Peter to answer the questions. And if you've got any questions on your mind, put them into the chat function on Teams, and we'll be reading through those as well. So let's kick it off, and let's put Peter up on the hot seat here for a second. So this is from the Chestermere Anchor, and they ask, even with all the feedback from residents, mostly against this development, why does Slokker believe this is a good idea for Chestermere, and what have they made of the feedback they've received?
First of all, we understand the grief of the golf course, the grief of the loss of the golf course, and quite frankly, the golf course is now and will be in the future not a feasible operation. The shortfall of 32% in revenue is too big, and there is no examples nowhere where you can make that up in such a competitive environment. So in the greater Calgary area, there is 52 golf courses, 20 miles in a radius of 20 miles from Chestermere. It's a lot of golf courses, growth of population notwithstanding, there is no growth in the use of golf courses. There is actually a decline in the amount of tee times. Now, that is the basis of the initial discussion of looking at this. And so when we look at where Chestermere current is, and when we look at the central location of the golf course, we truly believe that there is a win-win for all Chestermerians, and we do appreciate that there is some people that are directly impacted, and we understand that. But by and large, we think we can do an added value proposition to Chestermere, to all Chestermerians, with the idea of the main street, with the idea of basically using existing infrastructure to basically lower the cost per household in Chestermere, effectively increasing the use and efficiency of the existing infrastructure. So that is our background. We saw, of course, the petition going around, signed by 3,000 people, give or take. But we also want to emphasize that that was a very open question, an open petition against, widely distributed, and not signed by Chestermerians exclusively. And so we really want to focus on Chestermere, on the residents in Chestermere, the stakeholders close by and the stakeholders in the remainder of Chestermere, and discuss a potential win-win where the main street and open spaces, walkability, local retailers, think about the local coffee shop, think about sitting on a terrace, and not being surrounded by an ocean of cars, but really truly a walkable main street or high street. Like, you know, good examples are around, like in Bridgeland, there is one in the making, in Kensington in Calgary, Mardeloop in Calgary, Cochrane has a bit of a main street, as well as Okotoks. It's part and parcel of a true city with an urban village.
Great. A couple questions from Colleen Underwood at CBC. Who would pay for the upkeep on the park green space for a sports park?
That's a very good question. And so normally the municipal reserve would be a part of the park space of the city of Chestermere. In this particular case, because it's a dedicated community, there is, for example, what they call an endowment possibility. The City of Calgary applies that. So basically all basic pathways, all basic amenities are part of the City of Chestermere's operating cost. But you can add on top of that, for example, think about a unique playground structure or a pavilion or a community center, and those costs can be borne by the new community as basically a community levy, just like, you know, Livingston in the north or Mahogany in the south in Calgary. All those bigger communities do have a community assessment.
Question for Colleen Underwood. Why not show good faith and consider putting the golf course up for sale publicly before proceeding?
We know that is a question that's coming around. The golf course is not viable. It would require a benefactor to think about offering any money for the golf course, and then on top of that having to invest about $3 million in the current capital shortfall. The clubhouse is dated, needs a new roof, new kitchen. The ponds around the clubhouse need maintenance. The sand pits and so on need maintenance. There's an enormous shortfall that has built up over the years. And it's not due to bad management. This is due to a steady decline in green times, steady decline in membership, mostly because of aging out. and a steady increase in operating costs that has not stopped. The inflation has continued, and the minimum wage of a number of years actually gave quite a shock to their operating cost from one year to the next after that stable. Just the golf course, Lakeside golf course, has never received an offer. There is no transactions of golf courses that I am aware of that have not been done with some redevelopment in mind. The only golf course that I know has been recapitalized was the Bear Spa golf course after their disastrous upgrade adventure in their clubhouse.
A follow-up question on that from some other folks that have come in. There's skepticism about the business practices of the golf course, and combine that with the fact that Chestermere is likely going to be one of the fastest growing communities in Alberta. Why are we not able to have a viable business now, and why aren't we projecting viability in the future given the growth of the community?
Yeah, the answer is pretty similar. Again, there's 52 golf courses in a 20-mile radius. All of them have seen competition amongst each other to gain players and a declining amount of tee times. The competition is with Netflix and Disney Plus and video games and alternate leisure opportunities like going to the Caribbean or something like that. The city of Calgary over the last 12, 15 years has grown from barely 1 million people to 1.5 million, and the city of Calgary is struggling mightily with their city-owned golf courses that they are subsidizing every year, have a similarly big capital funding gap, and actually the city of Calgary has closed already the Richmond golf course and probably a few more to follow. There have been a few other casualties in the same vein, and as everyone knows, Shawnee Golf Course has been redeveloped into residential, as well as Harvest Hills. One of the other more active acquirers of golf courses has basically redeveloped the portion, right? In the northwest of Calgary. Harvest Hills, for example, has been redeveloped or partially. The pressure, the economic pressure on golf courses is enormous, and the attendance is down.
The new owner would pay for all of that, so it wouldn't cost the old owners anything. So what's preventing a new owner from coming in and restructuring and making a go of this?
There is no viable business case. Reinvesting money in a golf course that does not have any opportunity to increase revenues, because there is no example of any other golf course in the greater Calgary area that has done that successfully.
With COVID, and this, I think, is getting back to the MNP report that you've been referring to. First of all, how do we know that that's actually unbiased, and that we didn't just pay for those results? And second of all, it didn't factor in the last year where we saw an uptick in attendance because of COVID. So can you address those 2 points?
Yeah, so MMP, and it's not a feasibility study, it's a viability study. So MMP took the numbers of the last 5 years, 2014 to 2019, reviewed those existing numbers and basically compared that to the existing golf industry. The existing golf industry is not in great shape. The average profit in the existing golf industry is 1%, and that takes into account the winners, so golf courses that are purely private and well funded and so on, that have the attraction, and it takes also the city-owned golf courses and golf courses that are just not going well, right? For example, the golf course in Boulder that basically sold out of bankruptcy earlier last year. MMP used existing numbers prior to our involvement in the golf course. So there's basically existing numbers that went to the Canadian Tax Revenue Agency. Last year's numbers are interesting. They are, of course, an anomaly in the sense that tee times went up. Tee times went up pretty much everywhere. There was more interest. Flip side of that is that the restaurant revenues as well as corporate revenues that are quite important for the Chestermere Lakeside golf course went dramatically down. So the 2020 numbers were not available for review. They were not yet submitted to the accountant when we did the report, but on balance, the result is exactly the same. So more tee times, but no additional revenue as a result of loss of revenue in the restaurant as well as corporate revenue.
From the floor, there are no communities of our size without a golf course. So why would you include us in Calgary when we're not actually Calgary?
I'm not sure if that's the case, that there's no communities with a golf course. I do know that many golf courses are struggling, and the competition for tee times is regional. And so, in other words, you can clearly see that the attendance of the Lakeside golf course has steadily declined. The membership has dramatically declined. The revenues have declined or are kind of sort of stable, but the costs are going up. So the fact of the matter is golf is a declining sport and you compete regionally.
From the Preservation Society as well, with all the potential vacant land surrounding Chestermere, what was the determining factors in choosing to build on the course footprint as opposed to following the example of Dawson and Chelsea and building on lands adjacent to the community?
We are great advocates of living communities. We follow an organization called Strong Towns, and Strong Towns is looking at the viability and feasibility of communities, not only on the short term, but also on the long term. It looks to relationships and community building, use of infrastructure, alternate modes of transportation like biking, and our passion is in creating that environment. So we are passionate about Chestermere as a city. We are passionate about Chestermere with a potential city center that all Chestermerians will enjoy the amenities, enjoy the walkability, enjoy the bikeability, and as a result of that, creating a win-win for the city of Chestermere and improve the sustainability of the city of Chestermere.
Another question for you. What is the timeline for submitting a formal application?
As I mentioned before, we are going now through a round of pre-engagement, feedback, getting basically input on building our vision for a town center, making sure that we work on the right setbacks between houses, on the right pathways. And so with that information in hand, we will work with O2 and prepare a formal plan and engage with the city on the right route to submit the formal plan. We imagine that that will be later this year.
A question again from the floor. When we retired to live on the golf course, it was always our dream, and now you're taking that away from us. What can you tell us that's going to make that better for us?
So, yeah, we fully understand the loss of the golf course is a hard hit. It is something that everyone is familiar with, and is familiar with how that green space works. We hope and think that creating a walkable community and basically being on a walkable distance to the new main street, that the amenity of open public accessible pathways will actually enhance the value of the entire surroundings. Being on a walkable distance to a main street adds tremendous points to, for example, how Realtor.ca accounts their amenity value. And so together with generous setbacks, basically where the public pathways will be, we think that by and large, the enhanced public accessibility will help with creating a better community.
What guarantees can you give me that my property values will not go down?
We cannot guarantee any adjustments in property values. What we can say is that the added value of public accessible walkways as an amenity and a main street as an amenity is significant. And I do not dare to speculate how significant it is compared to the sometimes not large premium on being on the golf course. Truly, you have to compare the values of houses in the surroundings and adjacent to the golf course, and then look at value of houses adjacent to pathways and so on. I personally, I believe, but I cannot guarantee, that the added value of being in a walkable community will supersede the value of being on a golf course.
Another question from the floor. We don't believe you've got the experience or understanding of Chestermere. So what makes you think you've got the expertise to build here? And as a follow-up to that, how big is this proposed development of yours going to be?
So start with the big elephant in the room. So number one is we are very cognizant of the idea that people do not want to see high density close by their single family home, and so our proposal is low density. So we are thinking of about 1,200 homes. About 2/3 of or roughly half will be single family homes. So basically facing the majority of the existing single family homes. There's some low density thing, townhouses or duplexes on the areas where it's a bit tighter, still with the generous setbacks, by the way, and then the higher density, which is still low rise, close by what we are thinking will be the main street. Our experience in Chestermere has been working with Melkor a number of years ago on the Chestermere Station townhouses. We understand how the city center currently works with the Safeway and basically an old-fashioned strip mall. And from that experience, we work and look and compare that with all our experiences in other cities like Edmonton, the Griesbach, in Curry Barracks, which is a Canada Lands development, and compare those areas. And so we think we can propose a win-win for the citizens of Chestermere and the city of Chestermere, and that's where we're coming from.
Another two-part question for you. How much green space are you committed to keeping? And what do you mean by bike-oriented development?
We at the moment are looking at approximately 40% open space. So that means ponds. We are trying to keep the majority of the ponds, the right-of-way under the power line, as well as roughly between 8 and 10 meter setback between the houses and any new development. What I mean with a bike-oriented development is, and there is a great video, and we will share that later. It's a video, it's a bit long, but it's a video of a small town in Finland, where they show off how in the winter and summer as well, I guess, but how basically they separate out bike pathways from any traffic, car traffic. And so what I mean with the bike-oriented development is that you can reach various locations separately from cars. And in the case of Chestermere, because the majority of the infrastructure is readily available underneath that power line, we think there is a great opportunity to create such a bike path system north to south of Chestermere. And basically imagine that we have a small farmer market or artisan market in the new main street that you basically can bike either from the north or from the south in about 5 minutes to this market on a sunny Sunday afternoon and enjoy ice cream or like I like to have early on Sunday morning how do you call it, one of those buns, cinnamon buns or something like that.
A couple other questions from the messaging. So how much money has Slokker invested in the golf course, if any?
We are partners with the golf course, and I would say that further to that would be private information.
The number one priority that folks identified in your survey was to keep the golf course. Why not give up now before you've spent more money than you already have?
A fair question, so I will give a fair answer. The golf course is unviable, it's unfeasible. And we understand that a small number of golfers in the city of Chestermere are heavily disappointed, and we understand that there is some neighbors that are adjacent to the golf course that are heavily concerned about their views. We will try to mitigate as best as we can any impact on views, and we are very committed to making sure that the maximum value, added value, will be achieved via the public pathways, the main street, and so on. The feasibility of the golf course is in such a dire strait in the long term that an operating golf course is not a viable thought.
Follow-up question. You say that the development won't impact my house value, but I can't even sell it right now. Buyers are not excited about this development, and the value of my property on the market is currently zero. How do you respond to that?
Well, for zero, I'm happily to buy it. Look, I am very certain that any and all houses are now and in the future sellable, and I don't think that will change.
All right, a couple other questions here. I'm just reading through these. Is there going to be more access to the lake through this development?
Other than that, the walkability towards the lake, and mind you, any and all of the properties inside the golf course at the moment have no pathways. And so the walkability to the lake will be greatly enhanced by the pathways that we propose, and they're all publicly accessible. The other thing that most likely will be part of the proposal is some alternate access to Lakeside Boulevard from Chestermere Boulevard, and probably that will result in a dedicated access to the current beach from Chestermere Boulevard, and actually reducing some of the traffic concerns that currently are there.
Another question from the floor is, this is mostly about the west side. What's in it for the folks living on the other side of the lake who don't necessarily use the golf course?
Well, again, we are heavily committed to the idea of the main street and basically making Chestermere a livable, independent city. And so on Sunday, biking over the bridge to get to the main street and enjoying local retailers and some local artisan retailers. You know, some style of shops that will have a hard time being in a strip mall environment, but will operate way better in a communal environment. And a really good example of such a development would be the Westman Village in Mahogany. You know, I think Mahogany is about the size of Chestermere, give or take, and it gives you a great idea of what is possible.
You mentioned tax implications, and that certainly did come up in the survey where people are quite concerned about broadening the tax base. What implications is this proposed development going to have on the tax base for Chestermere?
Because Lakeside Golf Course is in the middle of Chestermere, a lot of infrastructure has been built around the golf course. All the main infrastructure is there. Water, sewer, although the sewer needs an upgrade, it needs an upgrade regardless. So if this development goes ahead, the development will carry that cost. If the development does not go ahead, the citizens of Chestermere will have to carry that cost. In other words, we are basically proposing to use existing main infrastructure, and we will then build some infrastructure, local infrastructure, obviously inside. The summary: if you have a viable, feasible, strong town-oriented development where you basically use a lot of the existing infrastructure, you bring a lot of tax revenue to the city of Chestermere in an efficient way. And for comparison, anyways, a long story short, it will be relatively little cost with some significantly added revenue. And so the tax implications will be positive to the city of Chestermere, significantly positive. Now, if you add the main street and you know, individual shops and so on, that will bring independent tax revenue. That will be basically doubling up the income for the city of Chestermere without doubling up the cost.
Now we've got a couple of questions for Brian and the folks at O2, so I'm gonna we'll push him live here. Brian, one of the questions that came up was Chestermere is a 2-season city, just like the rest of Alberta. What amenities will you plan for winter as well as for the not winter times?
Well, first I'd say that, you know, we'd be asking the residents what kind of activities they'd like to see in the winter. But you know, we've been successful in creating spaces that have been able to use 4 seasons. First of all, you know, the main street, that'll be a 4-season place. We can see the main street having potential fire pits on it. Outdoor patios are now becoming 4-season with the ability to put blankets, outdoor heaters, etc. We've seen that in many places in our climate. And then there's a tremendous variety of different recreational activities that are available in the winter. We could envision, obviously, cross-country ski paths. walking and biking paths for winter mountain biking, or for fat biking. Skating rinks, we could see the potential for a skating loop. Again, if you're, for instance, if you're down in some of the parks in Calgary, Bowness, North Glenmore Park right now, they have giant fire pits. These places are busy, and we obviously we benefit from a lot of sunlight in this climate, and we do have some cold stints, but a lot of the time it's actually quite mild. Like, I think especially during these times of the pandemic, when people are looking to get outside more, the pathway systems, the parks, the spaces they're pretty packed even in the winter. So we think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for the winter seasons for winter sports.
Thanks, Brian. I think, will there be any height restrictions on the planned development? So my view right now is currently of the golf course, and I don't want to stare at a bunch of buildings.
Yeah, well, first of all, as Peter mentioned, we see there being a generous buffer between any new development and future development. And certainly when we design, we take into the impacts of any height and density into our design, particularly on views and shadowing and the impacts those might have. But I believe that, as Peter mentioned, this isn't intended to be a high density tower development. It would be mostly mid to low density townhouses of the majority of the higher density, but the majority being single homes, single family homes and duplexes, and townhomes, which are typically the same height as many new single family homes, and potentially some low-rise apartments in the mixed-use town center portion of the site. But once again, we haven't gotten that far in terms of proposing heights and densities. But I can assure you that we would be designing to make sure that any kind of height is placed in places that would create the least impact possible.
Another question: what do you expect in terms of housing for older residents?
Certainly, I think that any inclusive community has a variety of housing types that offers opportunities for all people to live. So, the most successful communities would have the opportunity for people to age in place, and certainly with the demographic of all of Canada changing and getting older, there would certainly be the opportunity with market demand to have places for older people. Peter mentioned Westman Village in Calgary, in Mahogany. It's been extremely successful because people want to travel less. They have more time. They want to spend time in a village center type setting. So we think that this neighborhood could be very attractive to people wanting to age in place. People who have lived in Chestermere, who want to stay in Chestermere, but live a walkable, amenity-rich lifestyle.
Where would the proposed main street be located?
Again, we haven't determined that for sure, but initial thinking they'd be potentially along Chestermere Boulevard. They're either in one of two places, but again, we're very early, so probably on the further west side of the development, along Chestermere Boulevard, and again in a place where it would there's enough space, but also be able to be integrated with the community as best as possible. But we believe that what we would like to do is create the town center so that it would be in a location that would offer the best access to all residents of Chestermere. So certainly with access from Chestermere Boulevard would be the logical place.
Question of that is, how do we know that you will listen to community input?
Well, because well, we're here right now, even right before we even start planning to start having this conversation with community. And it's best practice in planning. It's also we understand it's a requirement, and the council eventually will want to understand how we listen to the community, how we incorporated the input. In projects like these, you're not gonna you'll never be able to make everybody happy, but we'll do our best to listen to concerns, listen to ideas, and incorporate as many as we can.
How much traffic can we expect during construction?
Yeah, that's a question that's tough to answer at this time. This would be a phased development. It wouldn't all happen at once. And also it would be phased in a way to create the least impact on the traffic impact on existing residents, but it wouldn't be any greater than any new development throughout the city.
How long is the development going to take?
That might be a better question for Peter to answer, but given the scale, in our experience with similar developments, it would most likely be at least a 10-year time frame, I would assume. But maybe when we get Peter back on, he can clarify if he has any ideas of phasing, etc.
Back to the planning. The partnership that you've described leaves a really strong impression that this planned development is a lot farther along in the process than is actually being shared. How many meetings have been held with the city planners?
Actually, very few. We've had 2 introductory meetings. The staff at the City of Chestermere are very busy right now. And so they're certainly aware of our intentions, and we've had some initial discussions. But we have not even started the pre-planning or the pre-application process with the city. So it is very light right now, and we intend on pursuing that more formally in the next few months. But so far, we've just had some very introductory meetings with administration and city staff.
More questions for Peter, and then we'll wrap up here. Peter, question from Cindy Stephen at the Calgary Herald. Will the golf course operate for the 2021 season?
Yes, we have committed together with the current operator, the Lakeside Golf Course, to operate the golf course for at least 2 more seasons.
Would you consider keeping a 9-hole golf course in place instead of getting rid of the whole thing?
No. The golf course being 18 or 9-hole is just non-viable. And 9-hole golf courses are actually worse off almost. Very few 9-hole golf courses are still operating, and the one that we know of in another small town is actually also considering getting it closed. So it is just not a viable option.
Another question, what would we do if the application through the city is denied?
We understand that this will be a long process. It will require a lot of steps to work with all citizens of Chestermere to explain that the golf course as it currently stands and in the future is a non-viable business. So we will proceed and work with the City of Chestermere and hopefully explain how good of a win-win situation redeployment of this land can bring to everyone involved.
that covers off most of the questions that have come up. What's in it for? Oh no, I think we've covered that. I guess maybe Peter, a general question is what's in it for the folks that are not members of the golf course?
Well, the current membership is at an ultra low, right? There's 146 members. The majority of people in Chestermere and the vast majority of people living alongside the golf course are not members and not golfers. I think what the benefit is at large for everyone involved is that although we understand that it is tough to lose the golf course and to realize that there is an amenity that is not profitable anymore, and is better off as with a changed use. However, it will be a changed use that will bring added valuable amenities to the whole of Chestermere, and in particular to the people living close to those new amenities. A main street is a tremendous amenity. People love that. The Kensington, Bridgeland, it's a lovely amenity. Walkability is a fantastic amenity. Hopefully a dog park, off-leash dog park is a fantastic amenity. Being able to bike north to south and maybe bike with a dog and bring the dog to the dog park, or again that the artesian market, and don't think something big, that will be something small that fits the size of Chestermere, but that will bring, you know, dedicated Sunday morning traffic, because that is the thing to do on a Sunday morning, and again enjoy a cinnamon bun or something like that. All those amenities will bring tremendous value to Chestermere.
That is the bulk of the questions. If there's any other questions in the chat function, we're going to collect those and we'll post those up on lakesidefuture.com. And let me just put up the site here so you can see. So any further updates can go, you just visit lakesidefuture.com. We're going to also be posting the recording of this event as well as the one on Thursday for the folks that weren't able to see it or wanted to go into a little bit more detail on this. I want to send my thanks and apologies to the folks that weren't able to join in as presenters from the tech perspective. These folks worked really hard to be here and to prepare questions. And so Cindy Stephen at the Calgary Herald, thank you. Emily Rogers at the Anchor, Colleen Underwood at CBC, and of course Darby, Brent, and Nicole from the Preservation Society, who have been fantastic at bubbling up some really important issues. So my apologies to those folks that we weren't able to get you in directly, but we were able to get most of their questions through text. So thanks for bearing with us on the technology. And again, thanks from us here at NSTs for everybody's participation in this and engagement. Today is probably the start of a lot of further discussions, and hopefully this will give us at least some pathways to direct communications with each other. Again, on Thursday we'll do the same thing, 7 to 8:30. So you're welcome to join again if you want, or tell all your friends and anybody that's interested to come and ask questions then as well. And again, feel free to visit lakesidefuture.com for more updates. And with that, I will thank our panelists. I will thank everybody for spending an hour and a half with us on a Tuesday evening. And we look forward to more discussions coming down the road in the future. Thanks again so much, folks, and all the best. Cheers.